So just so you know, this lecture has basically 4 big categories of advice for how to become a good guide into exploring culture well.
We're in the Wise Guide section.
In the Wise Guide sections, yeah, it's on page 82, but 82 comes right after 33, or 81 comes right after 33. So yeah, this is going to be 4 big categories for how to become a wise guide to help youth explore culture. We'll talk about the first 2. We'll break for lunch. It's not a natural break, so it'll feel a little bit funny to break there, but we'll manage. All right? All right, let me get my head in shape. All right, welcome back, Entering Culture Courageously. In the first half, we talked about why it is that becoming specialists who are able to engage with culture well is so important for youth ministers as opposed to any other kind of ministers. It's not as important for children's ministers. It's not as important for adults ministers, because exploration into culture isn't a fundamental part of being a child or being an adult in the same way. But being a youth, it's an essential component of figuring out how to have an adult identity. So as youth ministers, it's our job to be specialists in this area. And we talked about the kinds of dangers that are worth caring about in this area, because it's really easy for us to accidentally decide that things are worth our fear that aren't worth our fear. And I tried to persuade you that the number one most dangerous thing in respect to all of this is your own fear, and allowing yourself to be motivated as a minister of God by fears other than the fear of God. So that's what we talked about so far. And now we're at a place where we can start figuring out how to make this a reality in your life and in your practice. So I've got 4 major categories of advice for people who want to become specialists, wise guides for youth as their youth are exploring culture well, who set youth up to become discerning people as they form their adult identities. And if you take these 4 areas of advice seriously, it's going to change the way you consume media. It's going to change the way that you engage with history. It's going to change the way that you spend your time. And we're doing this training shortly before summer, which is awesome, because it means you can have a summer worth of time to try to retrain your habits in these areas so that you can hit the fall running as more wise guides in terms of culture than you are right now. So I want you to try to, as we're talking through these 4 categories, be asking God and thinking hard about what disciplines you could start putting into practice in your life this summer. Don't worry about right now necessarily, just try to finish the year well with the resources that you have. But since you are specialist ministers who have a fairly big break during the summer in the direct ministry that you do, most of you at least, use that time well to level up over the summer. So be thinking about what disciplines you could activate in your own life to become better at this for the sake of your students. So our job in part is to help students enter culture courageously. We need to become wise guides for them as they explore. And in order to be wise, we need to become people who can see God's glory everywhere. We already talked about this some when I introduced the Philippians passage. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure. But this is something that takes practice and discipline. It's not something that comes immediately, naturally, or easy to any of us. And it's something that you can become a targeted specialist in. What are the areas in your life where it's particularly difficult for you to recognize God's glory? Okay, what resources do you need to go spelunking down into that cave and find the gems? We can develop the ability to find a way from anything in culture or the cosmos to the worship of God, who reigns above all cultures. There is no dead end where worship cannot be found on the way through. You can't run away even as far as Tarshish and find a dead end where God can't be worshipped. You can't be swallowed by a whale and find a dead end where the worship of God isn't discoverable. Does this mean you should try to go to Tarshish or be swallowed by a whale, metaphorically? Does this mean you want to run to the evilest places in society, that you should start exploring Wiccanism or something like this? Obviously not. Duh. But you need to trust that if it's real, God's love is falling on it and God's glory is discernible through it, somehow. Even the worst expressions of sin and failing are always driven by a desire for godlikeness of some kind. People who exercise domineering violence over others are attracted to godlike power, which is good. Godlike power is good. Is it good for humans to have it right now? No, we mess it up. But do you want to be godlike? Yeah, we all want to be powerful, and you should want to be powerful. You should also recognize that you are not responsible, or that you're not reliable with power. But you should hope to become the sort of person who can handle godlike power someday. Jesus says you will. You'll judge the angels. You'll move mountains. So like even in the worst awful things, even in the most violent things, at the core there's a testimony of a desire for godlikeness. How do you do this? How do you become someone who is excellent at discerning God's glory everywhere you are? The first step is by meaningfully devoting yourself to God's excellencies, to trying to see as clearly and purely as possible the immaculate goodness of God and his incredible beauty and his incredible truth. Not just remembering that he's beautiful, but working to behold his beauty. Not just remembering that he's good and being able to say the sentence, God, you're good, but trying to apprehend his goodness. Not just saying God is true or God knows what's good, but actually trying to agree with him about the truth through hard intellectual work. So, transcendent principles of God's character, like goodness, like truth, like beauty, trying to understand what beauty actually is, trying to understand what really is true in the world, trying to understand what justice looks like and what mercy looks like in practice. These are hard questions. What is justice? Classically, one of those questions that's going to take thousands and thousands of years for anyone to answer correctly, but try. So what that we haven't found a good answer to what is justice that everyone can agree upon? What's your answer? Figure it out. Be someone who's devoted to philosophy, who's devoted to beauty and aesthetics, who's devoted to practicing goodness and recognizing goodness everywhere it is, deep down righteousness. Someone who wants to see these attributes of God in their purest forms so that then you can recognize them in unexpected places. Having an intricate understanding of what makes beautiful things beautiful because God is beautiful. Having an intricate understanding of what makes good things good because God is good. Having an intricate understanding of what makes true things true because God is true. In order to do this, you're going to need to become a theologian and a philosopher and an artist. In order to do this at its furthest extent. All those things take hard work. You feel inadequate for them. Good job. You are inadequate for them. What can you do to make a step closer to all of these things? To become a better artist and philosopher and theologian. Okay? So that's one. You also want to look at Christ-like virtues like faith and hope and love and understand what faith is as best you can. what hope is, what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like, what love really is, what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like in its purest form. So that when you engage it in the fragmented and ugly and messed up situations that we have in life, you can discern what is pure. And then heavenly excellence. What I mean by this is, what are the kinds of things that humans might still be doing on the new earth? Like the kinds of things that will last. At the end of Revelation, the New Jerusalem descends and it says the glories of kings are brought into it. I don't totally know what that means, but I think it means that we get grand pianos on the new earth. Because what's the glory of kings if not grand pianos? Or maybe Michelangelo's David, or maybe a few books here and there. Like the best stuff probably survives. I'm hoping to be a concert pianist by my 7,000th year. Because I'm going to have that, right? We're all going to have 7,000 years and 7,000 years on a new earth in new bodies. We're going to get to write new books and have more conversations and climb new mountains. Make stuff. So the sorts of things that we do that could plausibly still be done on the new earth, let's try to do them as if we are on the new earth. Let's have discussions as if we weren't going to die. Let's make pretty things as if we weren't going to die. Let's do beautiful things as if we weren't going to die. Let's get good at the stuff that we could keep on doing. And of course, nobody here is going to be good at all the things that you'll be able to do after you've been alive for 2 million years. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, try to discern, is this the sort of thing that could keep going on the new earth or not? Okay, let me try pouring myself into that because I'm interested in it. Let me get really good at this thing as practice for new earth life. This includes like becoming a great mathematician. Numbers are still going to exist. Math will still be fun and hard, I think, on the new earth. So worship by mathing. Worship by painting. Worship by becoming excellent at the things that are likely to endure. This also means being excellent in like serving people. Of course. So we start by devoting ourselves to God's excellencies, like his attributes, like the characteristics of Christ, faith, hope, and love, and like the kind of excellence that he delights in and he's going to continue to make possible on the new earth. So all of these things, we need to be people that are devoted to this. And this is important because when I raise this topic and start getting to personal application, all of the questions are like, but should I watch South Park? Or, but what about porn? Or, but what about Ouija boards? Or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, okay, yes, we need to have those conversations. But really, what about philosophy? What about theology? What about painting? What about it? That isn't in your life as much as you would like it to be. Throw it, like, we can talk about porn, whatever. Obviously, I'm not going to recommend that any of you go watch it in order to relate to your youth or something. But there are so many good, excellent, pure things that it's worth pursuing and working hard to become better at. Not because you want to show off, not because you want to make money, but because you want to start living the kind of way that you're going to be living for eternity. When we remember God's excellencies, we can see that every good thing comes from him, no matter how small or how hidden. Does this make sense intuitively to everyone that I've introduced it? So, especially at the beginning of your exploration, if you're someone who hasn't spent much time becoming an excellent explorer, don't start by going to the ugly stuff and trying to squint and find God. Start by finding the purest expressions of excellence that you can find and training yourself to be someone who's good at handling those things. All right? Pick some really hard books to read this summer. Pick some really beautiful experiences, not just to have and be like, take a photo of it so that you can remember, but to actually try to dip yourself into so you can understand what makes it beautiful. ask some really hard questions and actually try to find the answers this summer. What is it going to be for you? Next, with that reservoir of a rigorous understanding of the best things of God, of the deep things of God, we need to become people who demonstrate what it means to navigate through culture wisely. So you take those principles that you learn by exploring the best things that you can find, and then you practice navigating through other stuff using those resources. What does it look like to go back and look at something that is not the best now that I've spent time with the best? How does it change the way I engage with something else? How do I navigate what I'm encountering there? It would be silly to call you a guide if you don't know how to get from point A to point B. All you know is point B, right? All you know is the glorious stuff, the beautiful stuff. You want to be someone who knows how to navigate through the other stuff too. So intentionally returning with the reservoir of great, beautiful, pure, good things and figure out how to move through it cannily. We shouldn't, as youth ministers, be ignorant of what's going on in culture or clumsy with it. We should be knowledgeable and deft. Should see what's happening in culture and ready to try to make a path through it to worship. So ignorance isn't responsible. Ignorance about what's going on in our culture isn't responsible. But also just like blind being tossed around by it isn't responsible. Being aware and using the pure best things in order to find ways through it. We should exhibit the spirit of exploration. This looks like picking areas of culture that you know absolutely nothing about or that you dislike actively and figuring out how to like it as much as it's worth liking. And again, I'm not talking about the worst case examples. Like pick a genre of music that you have no respect for and shape it up. Shape up. Figure out how to appreciate what's awesome about it so that you can love the kid who loves that music better. So pick a few things, just a few things. What do you just hate for no good reason? Get over yourself. Figure out how to explore it in a way that leads you to worship. And what these two things allow is they allow us to become people who can get ahead of our youth in terms of cultural exploration. By understanding the goal of God's glory more clearly, and by practicing navigating through stuff that's confusing to us or hard for us, using that stuff, we can be someone who can leap ahead quickly through the jungle of cultural exploration of students and get them to a place with great stuff to discover. Does this make sense? We need to get ahead of our youth culturally. We need to become really skilled at recognizing irrelevant data when we see it, because there's a whole lot of stuff that our culture puts out that no one's going to care about in 1 year. What's the point of going all the way deep with your students on that when you could spend time on something else? So recognizing irrelevance, fads, stupid trends that you can just ignore while you focus on the awesome stuff together. Finding real excellence even in unexpected places, and becoming good at always inviting youth onward to never stop growing up. These are the things that will follow if you become someone who devotes yourself to understanding the purest form of God's excellencies, and if you devote yourself to navigating, learning how to navigate through uncharted cultural areas for yourself, using those as the guide. All right? So let's talk through each of those things one by one. Let's talk about getting ahead of youth culturally. What does that look like practically? Let's talk about recognizing irrelevance, cultural irrelevance. let's talk about finding excellence in culture. And let's talk about always inviting youth onward, practically speaking. First, how do you get ahead of your youth in terms of cultural exploration? As wise guides, you should always be a little bit ahead of them, ideally, culturally speaking. For youth to accept you as a guide, they need to begin to expect that you have good new things to show them that they wouldn't have found on their own. Earning that belief from them requires knowing to a certain degree their current tastes and anticipating their next tastes. That should make some sense, right? You can't be a guide, a cultural guide, if you're playing cultural catch-up with them. And this is the way that most youth ministers relate to youth culture. They get really into it about 2 years after the youth do. And then suddenly it's on all the slides. You know? So this sounds absurd in a sense, right? Because who's best at finding the next youth culture? Youth. It's not being marketed to you. You and your friends aren't coming up with it. So how do you get ahead of them? It's just the case that because it's not emerging from the marketers who are reaching you or from you and your friends, you're going to have to do some research to keep track of what's going on in youth culture. Keep track of your youth's media consumption habits. Where are they finding stuff? What are the platforms that they're using to discover new things? And spend time on those platforms to get used to what it's like. You know, don't become a TikTok addict, but figure out what this TikTok thing is. And don't worry about the fact that you sound really old when you say, figure out what this TikTok thing is. It's okay, you are really old. Regularly ask the youth who you're relating to show you awesome things. What's awesome? What's good? What's new? And not in like the Nicki Minaj sense, like what's good? We don't need to go there. Ask youth to show you awesome things and be the sort of person that they know they can show you whatever they think is awesome right now. And then always ask them, what do you like about this? Rather than, why on earth do you like this drivel? You know, that not as good. If they're showing you something that they think is awesome and you look at it and it's like, I just want to throw up in my mouth constantly right now. You say, oh, what do you like about this? What do you like about this? Get a sense for what's motivating them to go to bad places. Like, of course they're going to find disgusting stuff. They're really bad at this. They're brand new to it. You should actually be confident that you're better at this than they are and that it's okay for them to be really bad at it. Yeah, they are fine. If you think it's crap, you're probably right. Don't be embarrassed by the fact that there's a generational difference. But don't lord it over them. Meet them in their exploration and learn what it is that motivates them to love the things that they love. Okay? So know the tastes of the youth that you're ministering to. And then once you've gotten that data, do your research. Again, I mentioned last time that I've watched almost no Marvel films, but I've read every plot synopsis and could engage in a conversation without a youth knowing that I haven't watched any of them. Not because I'm trying to deceive them, but because that's part of their culture, so I have some sort of responsibility to be conversant in it. You don't need to listen to all the music they listen to, but you should research the bands. You don't need to read all the books that they read, but you should research the author. Kind of get a sense for what's going on and why it's happening the way it's happening. Find answers to questions like, how did this thing that they love get made? That's such a great question. The how question, really interesting things to discover there that will lead to good conversations with your students. How did it get distributed? Where's the money? What other things does this reference or relate to? When J.K. Rowling put an Aeschylus quote at the beginning of Deathly Hallows, all of the classics professors everywhere in the world said a prayer of thanksgiving, because suddenly there were going to be a whole ton of high school students who would be possibly interested in reading Aeschylus. You know, like, what are the influences that are going into what you're listening to? When there's really like popular stuff, there's almost always really awesome influences behind it. You know this in plenty of spheres, like the fashion trends that show up at Target started on the runway 5 years ago. You know? So what other things does this reference or relate to? What's best about it? What's worst about it? Do your research. Again, this is different from just consuming all the same things that your youth are consuming. Consume a few of them just to get a sense for it as part of your research, maybe. But mostly you just have a job to understand what their universe is like and actually know a little bit more than they do about how it operates, how it gets made, where the money is, all that sort of thing. And then get to the source. Find the things that influenced the creator of the stuff that your youth likes. Once you know those influences, they're almost always better than the stuff that your youth are actually consuming. It's probably like Tolstoy and C.S. Lewis and Aeschylus, like we were talking about just now. Like, find the things that were inspiring the person who made the stuff that your students love. Beyonce reads so many books. Not all the people who listen to her do, but if you find out that if you got a student who loves Beyonce and you find out the sorts of influences that Beyonce is drawing on, or like her references to art history, so many art history references in Beyonce. And then you like learn about the things that she's learning about in order to make the songs that she's making. It means that you can really quickly give a youth who loves Beyonce a springboard to something amazing that reinforces what they like and shows them a beautiful, a new beautiful thing that they could treasure for a long time. So get to the source. Once you know what the influences are, you'll be more prepared to find brand new experiences that your youth will be ready to appreciate. If they love Gore the God Killer, you can probably show them The Seventh Seal. This, again, the Swedish silent film that's black and white. I really love tricking students into watching old films. It's one of my favorite hobbies. I'll be like, you guys, we're gonna watch a movie about a knight who returns from the Crusades and then has a chess game with death, and whoever wins, you know, if he wins, he gets to live, and if death wins, death gets to kill him. And it's just this movie about this struggle between this knight and death. And then they show up and it's in Swedish and it's black and white and there's subtitles and they're terrified and they like, ugh, bang their heads on the death. And then by the end of the film, they're like, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, yeah, it is, I win, you lose. Great hobby, I love it. Can't recommend it enough. But you need to have seen Ingmar Bergman in order to do that. So you need to find out, like, this is an influence. Okay, let's go over and watch that movie. You don't need to watch, it's Thor, Love and Thunder, right, that Gore's in? You don't necessarily need to watch Thor, Love and Thunder. You could go watch Ingmar Bergman, have a conversation about Thor, Love and Thunder, and say, like, you know, it really reminded me of this weird thing that I love. You should check it out sometime. And then you're a curator of new experiences that they would never have found on their own. And then, finally, there's a cheat sheet. There are likely forms and likely topics that are really going to resonate with youth. That whether or not they have any access to them already are probably going to really work if you introduce them to youth. Because when youth are moving from childhood and entering into adulthood, they're forming a different relationship with death than they had. They're forming a different relationship with romance than they had. They're forming a different relationship with mystery, certainty, doubt, with heroes, with endurance, with courage. They're laying aside childish relationships to all of these things. So if you give them something that reinforces an adult relationship to death, they're going to eat it up whether they expect to or not. Because they're underfed in these adult areas, and they're ready to start becoming one. So without any reference to what they already like. You can just go and try to find the best film ever about dying. And you can count on the fact that even if it's like outside of anything that they've experienced before, if you show it to them, it could change their life. Because it's talking about something that youth are going through, a transition that they're facing. Youth are inherently interested in topics that are tied to the transition into adulthood. So gather the books and the movies and the music and all the things that match what it feels like to stop being a child and start being an adult. And then you'll have the things that you need in order to offer your youth the next thing that they'll love. And then if you know that your youth are particularly, like by and large, particularly good at recognizing visual excellence or musical excellence or anything like that, like maybe you've got a room of readers in your small group. It happens. Rarer and rarer, but it does happen. Maybe if you've got a room of readers in your group, then you can count on being able to give them a good book. So go explore great books. You've got people who like music, they're like musicians largely, then you don't need to know what they like in order to just explore music and talk about awesome music together. Artists, same thing. So these are all just like simple ways to, I mean, they're not easy. I'm talking about a real discipline of regular work to know what's going on in youth culture, to research it well, to anticipate the things that are connected to it by understanding the influences and sources for those things, by curating cultural experiences that relate to themes tied to adulthood, and by investing in the areas of cultural production that your youth care about most. Like, that's a lot of work. But all of it is work that you can do. You can pick one of those things and focus on it and make some progress this summer, right? All right, let's talk about one more broad area of advice, and then we'll pause before moving on to the last two areas. All right, this is really important. Becoming someone who can recognize cultural irrelevance is going to be really vital so that you don't just waste your time as a specialist in cultural exploration. And I got to tell you, like, youth ministry is often the exact opposite of this. Like, youth ministry often fixates on the fads in order to get some sort of credibility with students. Or we spend our time giving whole sermon series tied to things that the students have already stopped caring about or are about to stop caring about. Waste of time. But how do you know when something that your students are obsessed with today is going to be irrelevant to them in a couple months? You're not always going to know, but there are some pretty easy ways to make a good guess about whether the thing they're engaging in is going to be irrelevant or not. This is also important for ministry purposes. If you want to have a lasting influence on their adult identity formation, you want to give them things that they'll still care about when they're 50. Now, right? You don't just want to give them the sort of things that they'll chuckle about and be like, oh yeah, what a stupid kid I was in high school, right? You want to have their 50-year-old adulthood in mind as you're offering them awesome things, as much as you're able to. That's a much more powerful service to them as a specialist in navigating through culture. All right, so what are some kinds of things that you can count on as likely becoming irrelevant? The first category that I want to introduce is propaganda. Propaganda does not last very well. The things that constitute propaganda in the sense that I mean are things that are meant to inflame tribal sensibilities. Things that are make you, so like political parties deploy propaganda in order to like inflame your sense of, you know, Democrats bad, Republicans good. Me team good. We win, they lose. Like to make you feel like you know the bad guys and you are the good guys. Anything that's made for that, including stuff made by Christians, which just going to call out right now, the film God's Not Dead, horrible propaganda. Stupid, stupid, badly made film that's all about making you feel like college people bad, Christian good. Have nothing to do with it. No one will care about it, or the only people who do care about it are the people who leave church afterward and use it to show how stupid we are. Okay? Hot take. God's not dead. It should be dead. So propaganda inflaming their tribal sensibilities, something that inflames it, there's going to be so much propaganda this year. This is a presidential election year. There's going to be propaganda everywhere. It's kind of okay. Ride the wave. Let them get all worked up about the stupid things that are working them up, because you're not going to be able to stop the propaganda storm this year. Don't worry about it too much. Yeah, help make sure that they don't, like become an insurrectionist or something, but the propaganda is not going to last. You don't need to spend as much time worrying about it as other things. It's especially important, though, to ignore Christian propaganda, because they're not going to get the Christian propaganda from anyone else. You are the distribution platform, and if you follow the money, it's all going back to Sony anyway, which does not care about us. So make sure that you are filtering out Christian propaganda from your youth ministry context. Next, ephemera. Some things are made precisely not to matter much later. And TikTok is like the home of ephemera, right? It's all about the thing that's going to be cool for the next 3 days. And you rack up as many hits as you can for the next 3 days, and then you do the next silly thing that's going to be cool for the next 3 days. It's like ephemeratopia. Some things on TikTok are really lasting, like maybe the habit of addiction to ephemera. But most of the individual dances or trends or challenges or whatever, you can pretty safely ignore. There's plenty of other things that aren't designed to stop mattering, but there are lots of things that are designed to stop mattering, so they aren't worth your serious attention or consideration as a wise guide to youth. You're aiming for 50-year-olds them. You're aiming for their maturity. You're not trying to win points by being cool in the way that they're cool right now. You will never be cool in the way that they're cool right now. You have lost the cool. The cool is gone. Say goodbye, bury it. All right, next. You can count on things that are spectacle to not be lastingly useful, more or less always. This isn't always the case. This is one of the fuzziest in this category. But usually when something is valuable because of its novelty or its shockingness or its excessiveness, it's not going to be lastingly important. Big stunts of various kinds. And there are movies that come out each year that are mostly about a big old spectacle. And then you don't watch them anymore unless you're a weirdo who just happens to like it a whole lot. But it's not like a treasure of yours in the same way. Does this make sense? Now, there are some artists whose whole thing is figuring out how to harness spectacle for the sake of sublime and interesting experiences. I think Baz Luhrmann, as a filmmaker with varying degrees of success, tries to take all the tools of spectacle in order to do philosophy. And that's kind of interesting. So that feels different. And there are spectacles that are so spectacular that they stay shocking for a long, long time. And that feels a little bit different. But by and large, something that's just about putting on a big show, including, by the way, summer camps and winter camps that youth groups do, will have no lasting value of any kind. So ignore it. Ignore yourself when you're inclined to put on a spectacle. Aim for something that they'll treasure for 50 years instead. And then stuff that's just poor quality. And if you don't know if something's poor quality, ask someone who practices the thing. If you don't know whether a book is badly written, ask an author. If you don't know whether a film is badly made, ask a filmmaker. Ask a few of them, you know? If it's poor quality, according to the people who are experts in the field, just ignore it for now. Focus on excellent things as you curate these things for your youth, as you offer them the next thing to discover. In all likelihood, the things that aren't well made, or the things that are spectacular, or the things that are, in the end, just propaganda, or the things that are ephemera, aren't going to be worth your time as a minister to someone who is transitioning into adulthood. So let it all pass and focus instead on the great things that do connect to their interests, that do connect to their stage of life, so that you can, at the right moment, offer them an experience of exploration that reshapes their vision of the kind of life they want to lead. I guess leave too at some point. We all got to die, but you get what I mean. So those are the first two principles in how to become a wise guide for youth. And after this break, we'll talk about the last two, and we'll finish with a call again to remember why this is so important. Go ahead.
Can you talk more about Christian propaganda that might be tempting for us?
Yeah, Christian propaganda that might be tempting for you. So again, the question to ask in discerning whether something is propaganda is, what is this trying to do? If the thing is trying to make you feel like team Christian good, team not Christian bad, in a blunt sense, then it's probably propaganda. Another way to think about it is actually, is it trying to force you to give up your money or to give up your vote in a specific way? Is the whole point of this thing to make you do something that's useful to someone else? Is that the entire purpose? That's propaganda. So if you see something that's coming from Christian media, which again is like largely owned by Sony, and like the projects that are being greenlit are being greenlit for financial reasons in the same way that Sony greenlights all the other things. Turns out Christians are a really wonderful, gullible market for making cheap films that then they watch and give lots of money to Sony for, and then feel good about themselves with. Anything that you're seeing coming out, I'm talking about film, it's not just film, obviously. The Christian music industry is an industry. Is this worship song that sounds really beautiful to you actually just inflaming an us-them relationship? Is it making us feel good about ourselves in comparison to those sinners over there, like the Pharisee in the courtyard? There are a good number of new worship songs and old worship songs that do that. Those are propaganda. So it's about what the point is. Was this artifact made for its own sake, or for worship, or for glory, or was it made to make people feel good about the team that they're on and to get their money or their vote? And that's the difference. It's a tough call with some things. I think initially when God's Not Dead came out, I found it a tough call. I don't find it a tough call at all anymore, obviously, as you heard earlier. Any other questions? Yeah.
So in my youth group environment growing up, there was a very clear, our team is pretty diverse interest-wise, so I don't feel that with us, but I grew up in a youth group where the leadership team had the same interests, and kind of like their interest in surfing, in hardcore music, in certain things, either was you kind of joined, you obviously looked up to them, so you joined in on that,
Mm-hmm.
or you felt out and
Right.
didn't. And obviously with youth naturally looking to us most of the time and saying, I at least want to be liked by them.
Yeah.
Like how do we mitigate against that kind of dynamic versus honoring their interests?
Yep.
And not leaking all of our
Yeah.
immediate interests on it?
Yeah. Yeah, this is a great question, and it's actually like important for justice reasons too. So the question was, first there was a story in the youth group that you grew up in. There was a sort of monoculture among the youth ministry leaders. They were into surfing, they were into hardcore music, they were into a certain aesthetic, and they were really good at all of those things. And the students who looked up to those people or felt inclined in that direction fit in and got ministered to really well, and the students who didn't felt excluded. So obviously that's bad because students get excluded, but it's also bad because it can be radically syncretistic. It can combine the Christian faith with our cultural practices. It can lead easily toward the kinds of problems that are represented by Christian nationalism. And monocultural environments are almost always minority hurting environments. And this is particularly important for minority groups of people who are already inclined to be culturally injured regularly. So like non-white people or women who are just regularly injured by monocultural norms that don't fit with them. If you want to be a good minister to the full range of students who walk through your door, you need to be someone who is ready to resist monocultural impulses that makes church feel like a white male place, white male American place. Because that's going to be a way to injure people who aren't white males, and it's going to be a way to lead white males into idolatrous syncretism, thinking that they're better off, when actually it's just that they're more comfortable. So there's justice dangers inherent in a sort of monoculture ministry context. How do you avoid it? One of the first things to say is that I'm not asking everyone to become like taste chameleons. It's really good for you to know what you like and to still like the things that you like. And it's okay, you can't help it. You will. But being someone who's ready to try something new on the menu is a good quality to have as a youth minister. And someone who, when they try something new on the menu and it's weird to their taste buds, doesn't immediately go, blah, blah, blah. Like, just don't. Figure out how to stop the gag reflex in respect to whatever it is that you're engaging with your youth. So don't pretend like you're a neutral or objective or universally culturally loving person, but become someone who's capable of stepping outside of your cultural comfort zone pretty regularly. Testing this against other like nations, other cultures, other ethnicities is one of the best ways to make sure that this is something that's true of you. It's amazing how easy it is just by only consuming things that's made for your ethnicity or for your national culture to become someone who thinks that everyone else is stupid or inferior to you. Like, all it takes is just liking American stuff and not paying attention to the stuff around the rest of the world in order to accidentally become a fundamentally racist person. Whoops. So this is a good way to try to train your heart and also to make sure that you're the sort of person who knows to navigate excellent things that are outside of your comfort zone, is to frame your exploration that way. Yeah. So there's a beginning of some answers to that question. We can go back to the beginning that you made, which was just, if you've got a youth ministry that is identified with a specific aesthetic and a specific set of interests, then you are doing a niche marketing job that will exclude people who aren't in the niche. If you're a youth ministry that's ready to explore with whoever walks through the door and try to figure out how to do that wisely, then it'll look a little bit more like what the church is supposed to look like globally. Any other questions for now? Great. Let's break for lunch. I think we got 45 minutes, easy.
Yeah, eat wherever you'd like. You can eat in here, you can eat outside. We've got